we will start. It's almost 12:05 in Chile. I think 4-5 minutes in Germany. So welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to have you all today. This is our first open session of this semester of our Visionary Ecologies lab and seminar, which is hosted at the Rachel Carson Center for Environment and Society in Germany. But it's an online and open and nomad platform, actually. So yeah, we're really glad to have you all today, especially our 3 guests. It's an honor to have you today, and I'll pass the word to Jens, who's gonna introduce the lab and also the structure of our session today.
Thank you, Ellie. Welcome you all. Like Ellie said, this is our second seminar on visionary ecologies at the Rachel Carson Center, and also our 3rd seminar as a lab. We conducted recently the ecology seminar as well. And our lab is a recent creation between friends, basically, that started as a collaboration for the first visionary ecology seminar. And then it started developing more into a formal joint exploration through speculation of the future ecologies, basically. So our idea in this lab is basically come up with a space for visionary speculation. Cara will read about a bit what is visionary fiction, but it's multi-platform. We try to explore using video games, cartoons, animes, podcasts. It's a mix of everything that's out there at the moment, mixing together in this big earth, and in of course, the digital medias, our daily lives, some stuff that don't make sense, and we try to make sense out of it together, exploring also with students and other collaborators, like Sofia Rosa, who is also here and has been previously speaking in this space. We basically also aim to work together with academia, but not only that, but also use creative process to explore also the future ecologies. And in that sense, today's session is very important for us because we have 4 speakers from three different projects. We are really happy also to have their talks, which of them will last around 20 minutes. I please ask you, if you have any question, you may write them down in the chat, so we may discuss them after the 3rd presentation. We will present them one after the other just before their presentation, but we have today as first speakers Aníbal Fuentes and Yael Berkovitz from Colectivo Ronda. They will start opening the session. Agustín Segers. They will start opening the session. Then Aníbal and Yael come a second, and then Cecilia Vicuña, also a great Chilean artist, will close the session, and then we will have the questions. So Cara, please go with this quote we had prepared for you, and then we just go on.
Okay, so can everyone see the quote? Yes, so we can read along. Okay, so we have been focusing on visionary fiction and a lot drawing from Adrienne Maree Brown. And so visionary fiction is a term we've developed to distinguish science fiction that has relevance towards building new, freer worlds from the mainstream strain of science fiction, which most often reinforces dominant narratives of power. Visionary fiction encompasses all of the fantastic, with the art always bending towards justice. We believe in this space. It is vital for any process of decolonization because the decolonization of the imagination is the most dangerous and subversive form there is. For it is when all other forms of decolonization are born. Once the imagination is unshackled, liberation is limited. That comes from Octavia's Brood, which is one of the books that we have been drawing from, particularly in our first session. And so we always continue to refer back to that. I'll happy to drop it into the chat if anyone wants to pick it up again later. But so I think we can dive straight into the first speaker, Agustin. And I'll just quickly read your bio. Agustin is a Chilean artist and writer based in unceded Powhatan lands, By the way of queer and microbial mythologies, Zegers explores care practices that reach microscopic dimensions by incorporating bacterial communities, aromatic molecules, and food absorption in their artistic projects, creating tools to reflect about cohabitation, interspecies, and intrahuman belonging and care itself. The work has been exhibited and published internationally at venues such as the Venice Biennale, the Sarja Art Foundation, the Institute of Queer Ecology, Genderfil Press, and Diz Magazine. So, Agustin, welcome. And if you need to share your screen, I'm making you a co-host. So, take it away. Thank you for being there.
Great. Thank you so much for your introduction and all of you for this invitation. I'm very honored to be in this space and holding ecological conversation and also in Chilean community. It's very exciting. But yeah, I'm Agustin. I use they, them pronouns in English and ella in Spanish. And today I will be talking about a speculative olfaction project called Agar Olfactory. But I want to, since I'm starting off the session, to have a moment of meditation. So I'm going to start us off with some guided practice to get us into the space that we're sharing. So I don't think I can screen share yet.
Yeah, actually, Ellie, you have to give them that power.
Thank you.
I think now it should work. But yes.
It's working now. Great. Great. So I'm going to start us off with a quote from Dr. Bayo Akomolafe, who writes, "We are atmospheric beings. We are not contained. We are spread out, quite literally. We are participants in an ecosystem of feeling." And he also writes, "We're participating in ghostly becomings, ghastly becomings, chemical becomings, microbial becomings, and neuroparasitological becomings." So before I briefly chat about the project and speculative olfaction, like I said, I'm going to offer a moment of guided meditation in the spirit of pulling us into the world of molecularity and atmospherics, and feeling for ourselves the air as a substance that is dense, a substance that has agency, and that is in a process of not only composing us, but also being composed by us in our breath and how we unfold in the world. And in this, I also want to invite us to expose our porosity through the particulate, as writer Cristina Leon writes. And in this meditation, I will be inviting some aromatic and odorant molecules, which are simply molecules that we can perceive through our chemical senses, which are smell and taste. So some molecules just happen to have a smell. I'm going to invite a couple of them in that are already in your space with you. So to get us started, if you feel comfortable, you can keep your eyes open or you can keep your eyes closed. And I'd like for you to take a deep breath. Hold it for slightly longer than you usually would. Exhale through your mouth. And just sit in this breath for a couple of seconds. And as you breathe, especially as you exhale, take a moment to feel your own dampness, the dampness of your body, the dampness of your breath, and smell it. Feel the air you exhale, filling the space around you, inhabiting the layer between yourself and the space near your skin. What does that smell like? Pay attention to your tongue, the inside of your mouth, your palate, the airs that you make as you fill yourselves with oxygen, and with every breath as you deplete yourself in carbon, nitrogen, and odorant molecules. We live in a constant relationship to this tiny cosmos of bodily smells, to the point that they become familiar enough to lose grasp of them. We forget what we smell like. Imagine in this process of deepening breath, smelling yourself as if you're smelling someone else for the first time, experiencing the subtle formations that your body has developed over the years and congealed in your mouth, your armpits, your skin, smelling your exhaled breath as if it arose from another body. As we continue, keep your deep breath steady and grasping onto that dampness that I invited into the inside of your mouth. You managed to smell a bacterial byproduct in your breath, one that we all are producing right now. The bacterium Streptomyces is producing the molecule geosmin in your mouth. The smell is very familiar to us, and we're designed to detect it in the smallest of quantities. It's the smell of rain hitting soil, the smell of dampness, the smell of a juicy beet, or even a musty basement. And as beings made from and temporarily inhabiting this earth, not only do we encounter this molecule abundantly in soil and in our encounters with other beings, but we also produce it. And we can detect it in concentrations as low as 400 parts per 1,000 million. It's the same molecule that allows camels to find deposits of water, and it's the same molecule that is composing you at this moment. Keep breathing here, feeling the connection of your own body's productions to soil and the earth. And now, guiding yourself with your breath, allow your perception to travel from your nose and your mouth and what you're smelling around you to what is happening inside your body. So allow yourself to imagine that the same receptors that live in our nose and allow us to navigate the earth are also in the inside of your body. Imagine that your inner organs can smell in the same way as your nose. Pull yourself inward, imagining what you can smell inside your gut. Imagine what your abundant intestinal flora is making right now as it processes all the foods and liquids and emotions that you have been absorbing. She's creating a mass inside of you with the aid of an entire bacterial community, translating the fruits that you have cut, that you have slurped, that you've chewed throughout the day. And in here, you can smell another molecule called scatol. It is a derivative of tryptophan digestion and composes the majority of the smell of poop. So we all know what that smells like, scatol. And scatol is something that is related to indole, which is also responsible for the smell of our own excretions, and it connects us to a number of other beings. For example, if you inhale the fresh bloom of jasmine, you'll be smelling most of the components that smell like our own excretions. For jasmine, these molecules work as a technology of attraction in order to attract pollinators that eat dung and to lure insects like beetles and moths. It's the smell of organic decomposition used in order to create more life and more bloom. Summon, if you can, moments in the past where you've been acutely aware of the smell of your own body, of the smell of others' bodies, and think about the network of molecules that connect us to other beings in that. Call in the jasmine, call in root vegetables, call in soil, and see all of the molecular overlaps that connect us, not just at an emotional level, but at a physical molecular level. These tiny interactions and materialities connect us to the life-affirming actions that our bodies participate in order to be here today, and to the life-affirming actions of the earth as it creates flowers, as insects crawl up to find treasures along the stems of jasmine flowers, to algae, to air, to clouds that work towards cooperation and self-preservation. Breathe deeply with the sense of completion and company in this knowing, allowing the limits of your body to dissolve and incorporate all of these beings into yourself because they are you. And in your breath, in the sense of completion, allow yourself to come back into the space. You can begin opening your eyes slowly. You can begin finding your breath at its natural pace. And feel as you are today connecting with this wonderful group through screens, through fiber optic networks, through continental masses, through breath, through geosmin, and through this decentralized haptic presence that we engage in to be able to witness each other today. Thank you for breathing with me. And thank you all for being here. Just going to take a couple of breaths before I show the project, and please let me know if I'm over my time of 20 minutes. Just going to show a couple of slides. Yes. So what I shared in that meditation was just a moment to all, be in acute awareness of the space that we're sharing today, as well as with other beings, but also a little introduction into the world of smell. And that is my specialty as an olfactory artist. I work with smell, and I use it as a tool to be acutely aware of the intimacy that we share with the atmosphere, with other beings, and with the earth at a molecular level, right? And being aware of that porosity and interdependence that happens at a physical, chemical, emotional level for all of us. And also as a tool through smell, because we can detect molecules and things that we cannot perceive otherwise, it becomes a tool for us to bring an enlivened awareness to our atmospheres, to our ecology, and to the interactivity that we have between species. So the project that I'm going to briefly talk about today is derived from that, and It is called Agar Olfactory, and it is a series of perfumes that I made. It's a series of artist editions that are created from prompts from different speculative ecological futures. So holding with that is the idea that we're living through not just one apocalypse, but apocalypses that layer with each other. So we're living through the 6th mass extinction event. We're living through the wreckage of hundreds of years of colonialism. We're living through a global pandemic right now, and there's more things that are continuing to unfold. So I created a series of prompts for scents that would imagine what different futures smell like as ecological change and catastrophe continues to unfold. So for example, what happens when our monocropped crops are threatened and we no longer have access to wheat? Or what happens when insect extinction begins to accelerate, right? What does it smell like, and what do we need? So one scent is the smell of everything that attracts insects, right? So it's honey and florals and dung, and it's something that you wear as a charm in order to be able to attract insects once they're gone and you miss having them around you. Or it's the taste of a freshly baked loaf of bread, because we no longer can find bread at such a mass scale as we used to before. So it's a practice not only in imagining the smellscapes of the future, but also providing for ourselves in that and being able to extend the needs that we had from different times. So kind of collapsing those timelines. There's another scent that is inspired by fungi, and the prompt is that all of the anthropogenic materials that we've put in the earth are starting to decay and decompose, and the earth is so vibrantly filled by fungi that it's the majority of what we are able to smell. And we're living in fungal time and allowing ourselves to just be subjected to the logic and the beauty of fungi above all. So these scents, and I am sad that we can't all smell them together right now, but they invite us to think about and feel internally in our bodies what different futures of collapse can look like. And I hope that I will be able to show you these scents in your noses one day. And I'm keeping an eye on the time because I think I'm almost up with my 20 minutes, but it's been such a delight to share this meditation with you and give you glimpses of this project, Agar Olfactory, and the prompts are always expanding. So if you have speculations about what the future will be like and you want me to make a smell for it, please let me know, because I'd be honored to be pulled into your ideas of what our ecology is evolving towards. And thank you all again.
Thank you, Agustin. That was very beautiful. I think I connected, and many of us connected with your sensorial exercise. Thanks for sharing that exercise with us. Also, amazing work. I would love to smell it. I hope someday I could, or any of us could smell your work. Now we have our next speakers. I will present them, reading their bio. They are Colectivo Ronda. We have Aníbal and Yael from Colectivo Ronda with us today, which is a multidisciplinary collective inspired by the intersection of design, culture, and biology. They seek to educate on a culture of new materials, revaluing natural resources through innovative, open, and collaborative biofabrication proposals. Their first exhibition is called Vestigios, Archaeology of a Future Clothing System. Through clothing and accessories made with biomaterials derived from algae, a speculative approach to the future of humanity is displayed, taking into consideration its relationship with clothing and material culture after the collapse of capitalism. They will now present their work. Yeah, the stage is all yours, Yael and Aníbal.
Do I have permissions for share my screen?
Ellie, that's you. One moment.
Okay.
It should work now.
Oh, yeah. No, I can.
Great.
So, 1 second, please. Okay. I feel a little bad right now because we're gonna quick a little bit the rhythm that Agustin, the calm that Agustin brought to us. We have to broke it a little bit. Yeah, but thank you, Agustin, for that moment. Was really beautiful. So thank you for having us in first place. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be with you. Okay, Jael, you want to start?
Yeah. Well, thank you for having us. My name is Yael. We are Colectivo Ronda, and we're going to present our first project called Vestigios. Ronda is a multidisciplinary collective inspired by the intersection of design, culture, and biology. We explore possibilities for a new material culture through speculative design and biomaterial experimentation. Since we met 3 years ago, we have been working with two main interests in common. The first, biomaterials, understanding them as materials created by living organisms. At least we like to define them that way. However, there are many definitions. Anyway, we all felt and still feel a deep admiration and respect for nature. And we wanted to share and encourage that feeling. On the other hand, we were really interested in how the fashion industry works and its impact on societies and ecosystems. So we saw how consumption habits were completely opposite to that feeling we just talked about. And we understood that this was not only happening in textile area, but also in other areas such as food system, architecture, industrial design, and many others. As a result of mixing those two interests, we began to try to understand the way we relate to the objects around us, concluding that the main problem was capitalism and its effects on practically every aspect of our lives. So we ask ourselves, how can we reimagine our relationship with clothing in a post-capitalist world? And we start imagining how the future could be, and especially how we would like it to be, getting inspired by speculative design fiction, and some critical art projects. And based on that, we start to create a narrative by using biomaterials as a tool for discussing, showing, and criticizing our habits and materialistic culture. And that's how our first exhibition appeared. We call it Vestigios, Archaeology of a Future Clothing System. And here, through clothing and accessories made with biomaterials derived from algae, we display a speculative approach to how humans may be able to redefine and reveal the relationships with the environment and between them in a world without global capitalism. So we explore how the environment around us impacts our material culture and how it could play a more significant role in the future. This approach promotes the development of new materials, techniques, and technologies, as well as examining the behaviors, rituals, and rules of coexistence that are manifested through clothing. So our creative process was determined by different inputs. We decided to work with the resources that we as a team had available. We had previously worked with biomaterials from algae, and it made sense to us in narrative terms to work with these materials because Chile has more than 6,000 kilometers of coastline and an abundant marine diversity that today, sadly, is quite undervalued. We decided to develop our story in a specific town called La Boca, located in the central coast of Chile. Here, the river and the sea meet, sustaining an important biodiversity. Even if we never name it in our narrative, it was important to set it because this allows us to make decisions based in a particular context. So we didn't have to invent a world. The geography, resources, and species were already determined by this decision. We were inspired by the way that archaeology tells a story through objects, so we choose it as a language in order to reduce the amount of text and lets the objects talk by its juxtaposition. So we created a narrative to give coherence to all of these objects we were going to develop later. This acts as an invisible base of the iceberg, while the visible part are the objects that we display. The narrative is too long to tell and full of details, but it's basically divided in 3 eras. Late capitalism, that goes from the 80s decade to collapse of capitalism in a couple of decades more, which is of course characterized by the exploitation of the environment and other humans. Critical transition, a period that starts with massive migrations from cities in search of territories where there are still some basic natural resources like water and food. This is an area full of conflicts where the main goal for humans is to survive, but it's also a period where humans are obligated to recover some traditional knowledge in order to rebuild their culture. In this era, biomaterials are developed, which drives to an overexploitation of the marine ecosystem. And neo-foundational, the 3rd era, is a period of reconfiguration of the relationship between humans and with the environment after the biomaterial crisis, focusing the understanding of natural cycles and the restoration of ecosystem. In the final part of this period, archaeologists gradually lose the track of these human groups and the ability to interpreting their few facts, a few tracks. But everything indicates a new conflict appears between those who want to maintain their culture and those who want to take a step further towards absolute animality. So our exhibition, subterranean tunnel drives to the exhibition. At the end, a mountain of clothes welcome the viewer. By its side, an old television shows an interview to a future historian who introduced the main topics to interpret the archaeological objects, including the discovery of an audio coming from the future where an old woman tells the story of her people. This is the milestone of this future archaeology. Once we are into the exhibition room, a myriad of objects appear while in the background, the voice of the old woman starts to be heard. The objects are mainly vestiges of clothing, of textiles and tools, ordered in lineal path that tells the story of how humans were forced to recover their ability to repair and rebuild their clothing, to develop new techniques, technologies, to obtain raw materials from waste and living organisms. And later in the story, to redefine the culture in order to guarantee the stay of humans on Earth. At the final stage of the story, objects become less and less recognizable for the archaeologists, but something has changed. The symbolic function appears to be more important, and the control of the matter seems to be less. We cannot be sure of what these objects mean, but the interpretation is open.
So now we want to share with you some of the discussions that we had in order to make our work, and we're going to review some topics of this discussion. The first of them is about technology. So one of the first challenges we face is, in order to talk about future material culture, was to make conscious our vision about technology and the role that it could have in the future. And I guess if we show you an image of the future museum of Dubai, this is a render, maybe you can understand what we are talking about. We think that precisely in this issue, there is one of the big debates or even disputes about the narratives of the future. One of the definitions of technology describes it as a set of instruments, technical resources or procedures used in a certain field, which means that basically almost every object, even a pen, is a technology. In this case, this technology mediates between our body and the action of writing, and that has attached a set of knowledge in it. But for some reason, in our contemporary culture, the notion of technology is also associated to a specific form. This is a screenshot of when I search like future technology on Google, and what we're talking about here is that there exists a narrative hegemony that has already seized the future of technology, and therefore assumes that there's only one possibility of relationship in our world. So our choice was a certain primitive look of technologies for our work, mainly to bring onto play one thesis. We can say, simplifying a lot and without going into detail, that one of the civilizing principles of the Western culture is the idea of control, protection, certainty, security, and that our technologies are daughters and producers of the very same. So we decided that in our future, our technologies, in the future of our story, I mean, our technologies are not about controlling the world, are not about controlling the matter as much as possible, but about understanding and especially about optimizing the modifications we make on it. Salvation, this is an important topic for us. We made some questions to ourselves. Is a technology capable of saving us? Before that, save us from what? And where does this question come from? And we certainly live in a time of multiple crises. We all know that. And probably for this, or for some deeper reason, we observe a human soteriological impulse, which means that there is a search for salvation in almost anything, we should say, including technologies. So we as a collective prefer to suspect of this thinking. And above all, we were not interested in presenting the future as something capable of being resolved from a specific technology, as a quick recipe in an even quicker world, or as an easy answer to relieve a bit of our uncertainty in a world in permanent crisis. And the problem that we had with, specifically with biomaterials, is that in the very origin of the do-it-yourself biomaterials is linked to the narrative of saving us from our ecological crisis. But is it enough just to change our materials to ensure our stay on this planet? And probably we think that no, the answer is not. And we probably our civilizational problems are infinitely more complex than that. And one example of this is the biomaterial per excellence, wood. We as humans have thousands of years of relationship with it. And what we have made is to create a complex and efficient system of exploitation that results in the devastation of territories and cultures in countries that depend on the sale of commodities, between them Chile, our country. At the moment, and without having any answer, we refuse to think that biomaterials are some kind of salvation of something. Certainly, a lot more is needed. We think that it's needed a systemic and complex change. Crisis. And regarding the aforementioned, our interest was not to present the future as a set of correct decisions taken at this historical point, the present, which are projected linearly towards a harmonious future. On the contrary, we were interested in showing the difficulty of moving into the future, in showing the inertia that some mode of existence have and how this can continue dragging or ballasting the possibility of changes. So that is why our work speaks as an initial engine or as an initial power unit of the collapse of capitalism instead of its rational and harmonic reform. And that's also why our narrative later invokes other future crises. First, when humans believe that their salvation is this new material, and they almost annihilate their coast, and then when they dispute the possible ways of life in the future. So crisis here acts as a signal of a need to move from the status quo, as a signal of conflict between parts that do not fit. For example, nowadays, our concrete way of living versus the knowledge that we have about our way of living. Thus, we consider that crisis is a fundamental part of human condition, capable of expanding our understanding of things. And in this sense, crisis is not an exception outside of normality, as it is often seen, but precisely is a fundamental part of human learning. Trying, making mistakes, trying to fix what happened by taking another path, learning, continuing. In our story, we don't avoid crises. Actually, we embrace them. Ending. So, if there's no recipe for salvation but a continuous movement, and if the motor of this movement is crisis, then of course we were not interested either in proposing an ending of our story as an ending of the history. We were not seeking to take sides with either a utopia or a dystopia. We did not want it as sort of and they lived happily ever after, because it is precisely after that sentence that the difficult part of the story begins, in maintaining that happiness day by day after that. But we neither wanted a sort of and they disappeared from the face of the earth through their own fault, because that only demonstrates our poor capacity for imagination. If we are not capable of imagining a future, then probably there can be less hope in building it. So what we constructed as a final part of the story was not the end of the story in itself, but the end of what we can see from the present. But it continues to happen out of sight. We tried to bring to life in the imagination of every spectator. At the end of the day, we think that any ecological problem about the past or the future is nothing but a problem of interpretation. And for the same reason, we decided that in the final stages of our story, the functionalities of the objects dissolve into something that we are not able to understand from the present. Now we may not be able to imagine our future in, let's say, 200 more years, but maybe in 100 years more, we will have other tools to do so. Okay, but what is our current crisis about? Where does it come from? And undoubtedly, the answer is complex, but simplifying a lot, we can say that in Latin America, there is a narrative to explain this. And we insist, maybe it's too simple and even dangerously simple, but anyway, we decided to use it. It could be said that for us, especially for our indigenous people, our world began to be destroyed with the European invasion and colonization. It is the milestone, the breaking point of harmony with the cosmos. It was probably not entirely so, and in any case, it is impossible to say what would have happened if the sanguinary European invasion had never happened. But in any case, the possibility of thinking that the current crisis is not just an accident seems important to us. And we think that it's part of the very DNA of a project known by various names. Modernity, Western civilization, enlightenment, capitalism, science, reason, or logos. And for the same, in Latin American narrative, when we talk about the possibilities of harmony with environment, it is common to invoke a pre-modern or a pre-Western time. Regardless of whether this is too innocent or in its conception, it is important, and this interests us particularly from the beginning of the project, to ask ourselves what would be the role of the reason as a project in our future narrative. And without eliminating it from our future, we decided to take it down from its sacred position and to make it dialogue with other forms of knowledge, with other forms of relationship also. Among them, the main one for us is the ritual. The ritual is a relational tool present in practically the entire history of humanity and everywhere, and it's capable of ordering our world and of ordering our cosmos, and yet in contemporary culture, its primary culture is deeply eroded. So we think that in rituals, there is something to review and maybe to recover as another modality, let's say an aesthetic modality outside the fundamental logos, to build both the present and the future. And if one of the myths of modernity is that logos is the best and most valid way of knowing the world, then its immediate corollary, which is the notion of subject, also had to be put in discussion. So why did we decide that we as human beings are separated from the rest, and including other humans, and that also that why we think that the world is in front of us, available for our own use and enjoyment? So we think that this subject experience, which sets the axis or the center of the world in the self, in the ego, is undoubtedly a relevant part of our current crisis. And in breaking the limits of the subject, we see something very powerful. And that's why the roots of the Chilean feminist movement caught our attention. There are pieces worthy of being carefully analyzed, which blur the subject, building a collective body that takes over the space. But at the same time, this body is made up of elements that differ in their details. So we were inspired to imagine a future society in these terms, a group of people who, without necessarily eliminating their egos, are capable of becoming a larger body, a collective body, let's say. But we also know that it is necessary to expand this exercise, to expand it outside of the human species. For this reason, beyond logos, which eventually allows us to communicate between humans, empathy and corporality are necessary as a tool for a permanent dialogue with the other. And we imagine that in the rituals of the future, we will invite animals, plants, and fungi to our table. Footprint. This is probably one of the most important contemporary mantras. Like leave no footprint, reduce the footprint, avoid the footprint, to imitate animals whose footprint is quickly erased in time. But what is the footprint? While we agree on the urgent need to reduce our impact in our contemporary life, we do want to call to attention to the limits of this commandment of the contemporarity. Because footprints are also our ruins, footprints are also our texts. Footprint is memory, and footprint is one of the tools for the transmission of culture. So, is it all the trace that we want to eliminate? We are not sure. But if the answer is yes, the question that arises is, are we really ready for the disappearance of our history? Okay, at the moment, this contemporary mantra does not seem to point to that extreme interpretation, but is probably mentioned precisely because it seems absolutely impossible for us to imagine ourselves without a footprint. So it's a phrase thrown around because it lacks danger. Any reduction in footprint right now seems better than our current situation. But let's be careful what we wish for. As a warning, we imagine a future moment when this question becomes vital, or becomes literal and urgent. It becomes a crisis, a future moment in which humans will decide how far to carry out the disappearance of our footprint. Again, are we willing to disappear? We don't know. But we do know that any material culture, any possibility of archaeology, future or past, and any time travel of the imagination depends on someone leaving a trace. And to finish, we want to share one last thought about the work. Is why the future? Why to talk about the future? And as Frederick Jameson said, today it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. And we think that that's a huge problem. what we're talking about here, about impotence mainly, the incapacity of having agency over our system, produced among others by the specialization and alienation of work, for example, make us feel our place in the world as consumers rather than producers of this reality. And the problem with this is that this feeling is so embedded into us, so ingrained, that it has been almost impossible for our societies to establish a project of dismantling and reassembling our model of coexistence. So we think that it is necessary to open or even to blow up the possibilities of the future, because in the first place, the idea of the future is an imaginative exercise of the present. We think that talking about the future is not precisely talking about the future itself, but talking about the structures and tools that defines us in the present to build the future. And therefore, to speak of the future is to respond politically to the question on how to live together. And it's certainly a difficult task. So that is why as a collective, we force ourselves to destroy in the first place the capitalism in our minds without destroying the world, in order to explore at least one possibility of what the future would be like. But this task is not easy, we know that. And we also know that our work will probably quickly become obsolete because it is determined by our possibilities and by our decisions. But perhaps it serves as a stepping stone to see other things. So finally, we should say that for us, the important thing here is at least to try to fight the current hegemony of the future stories. And for that, it is necessary to subvert the mainstream and involve ourselves in the construction of images on the future beyond the known, beyond what we can see from here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aníbal and Yael, for such a beautiful presentation of your work. Also to Agustin. It's really nice to see all the bridges and connections between both of your works, and also now that we jump to present Cecilia. Actually, we have no words to express how honored and excited are to have you here, Cecilia, today. And I'm gonna briefly introduce you. I'm gonna read an excerpt of your biography. And then we can pass the word to you. So, characterized by ritual and collective action, Cecilia Vicuña's practice encompasses sculpture, poetry, site-specific installation, film, sound art, and performance. Closely intertwined with activism, Vicuña's artistic output since the 60s has addressed climate change, ecological destruction, women's rights, colonialism, and cultural memory. Her work was included in Documenta 14, Athens and Kassel 2017, and in the 29th Venice Biennale in 2022, where she received the Golden Lion for lifetime achievements. So welcome, Cecilia. I already made you a co-host.
Hola. Hello. I don't really know how to do this, but since you started by showing an image, should I be able to do that? I've never done it.
Yes, actually you should. I can also help you. If you want to share an image, you have to go to the buttons like below the screen. Compartir pantalla, like share screen.
Okay, I see. Okay, very. Okay, so I Did it work? Okay, very good. Fantastic. Okay, so first, I want to acknowledge the beauty of being here, the beauty of hearing Agustin and Yael and Aníbal, and the mysterious fact that the three of us come from this land, this thin strip that hangs between the mountains and the sea. And I wanted to begin by saying that the word gracias in Spanish is one of those mystery words that don't have a proper etymology. So I have created an etymology for it. And gra is the same root as gra, which is the heart, becomes corazón in Spanish. And instead, the word thanks in English is associated to think. So it's also associated to feel remotely. So if we can combine the force of the Spanish gracias heart with the idea that to thank in English is to think also, and we can arrive at a new interpretation of thank, think, feel in English that comes closer to our own perception of thanking from the heart and through the heart. As I was hearing the journeys of Agustin into the smelling and the breath and the breathing that makes us the most vulnerable creatures on this planet, and at the same time the strongest, looking at the fact that we are now 8 billion of us, and looking and hearing Aníbal and Yael and their journey into what is really a biomaterial and what is really the potential of crisis, I was thinking the old ones here in the group, and the way that I have journeyed in this universe is through opening up completely to the fact that it has been known to us, it was known to me as a teenager, that life on this planet, especially for humanity, was totally under threat. We knew it already more than 50 years ago. So the time that we have spent looking away from this reality is what has brought us to this moment where, as you well quoted, it is easier for us to imagine our death than to imagine renewal, transformation, and regeneration. So my response to that, my animal response to that, as a kid, as a teenager in Santiago, living at the foot of the mountains, was to open up to the reality inside words. And that's how my palabrarmas process began. One word opened up and showed me the universes inside of it. And so if you think of the word to imagine as a tool, imagine I open it up in palabrarmas and ima becomes the iman, the magnet, and gen becomes the generation of life. So the image is the magnet of genes in this language within language that the palabrarmas are. So if we can magnetize our imagination of a different future collectively, millions of us, artists, thinkers, people who are sensing the potential of a death as terminal, as extinction, or death as decomposition, as the plant created it, death as renewal, death as transformation, death as creating new life. And so how can we magnetize this imagination? The way to begin is to do it within ourselves through our breath, as Agustin showed us, through our touch, through our continual sensing and acknowledgement that we are being sensed by bacterium, by molecules, by particles, by beings of all kinds of this dimension and all the other dimensions, visible and invisible, that sense us the way we sense them. So this acknowledgement began for me long, long ago. And when I was looking at your presentation, Yael and Aníbal, and I was taking pictures of the presentations of both of you so I can learn from you, both of you presenters. And I noticed that you had a long black strip and you had an image, that not an image, you had a word saying neofundacional, and it had a spiral. And you had previously spoken that you had chosen to begin at La Boca. La Boca, for the English speakers, means the mouth. And it refers to the mouth of the river Aconcagua, which is at the foot of the tallest mountain of the Western Hemisphere. And even though the Aconcagua River does not come exactly from the mountain, we perceive it and believe that it is. And just as you said, is not only the center of the oldest, richest, ancient Pre-Columbian cultures of Chile, going back more than 10,000 years, as far as we know, but it's also the site where extraordinary utopian projects have existed from the late 19th century into the present. And it happens to be the place where my art began in 1966, when I was still a teenager. And so when I saw that you associated that spiral of the new foundation of our imagination, that's how I interpret it, I wanted to share with you this image. This little person on the side is Cecilia, having drawn a spiral in La Boca. So that is my act of love for this moment that we are living together in this group, attending to this, to the death of La Boca, because La Boca, being the site of ancient Pre-Columbian sacred cemeteries, is precisely the site where the Chilean government picked to construct the first oil refinery in Chile. It happened in the 50s when I was a little girl, in the early 50s. So I grew up playing in the sand with my feet becoming black from the petroleum. So how can you play with your feet becoming black with oil and simultaneously become unaware of it and oblivious to it? So the real crisis, the deeper crisis that we're living, is one of awareness, is one of deciding, wishing, wanting to protect ourselves by denial. And of course, this denial generates the fear and the hatred and the violence that is such a big threat to the continuation of humanness. So I imagine speaking, telling you a few little things, but first, in relation to involving other languages and our other beings in our rituals. This happens whether we want it or not. So it's happening, as Agustin was telling us, continually. If it didn't happen, we wouldn't be here. We cannot be human without all these bacteriums and all kinds of particles and molecules at play in us. And so in my current project, which is in London at the date, the Brain Forest Kipu, I am acknowledging this fact that life itself on the planet is really like a rainforest. And we are part of it. We are an infinitesimal part that is taking too much space and too much strength, destructive strength, and that the potentiality is for us to turn that strength into its opposite, into love and compassion to our own violence and stupidity and what we're doing to the earth. So as I was beginning to work on this installation, it so happened that the rivers were drying all over Europe, including the River Thames. So I decided to initiate this rainforest kipu, of course with rituals, the way I always do, and that is the reason why I'm putting this funky knot in my forehead, inspired in the mining. You know, the miners go into the depth with this little thing to light their journey. And for me, I light my journey with the knot, with the kipu knot. For some reason unknown and undeciphered to me, as to everybody else, the kipu has been a system of knowledge that is 5,000 years old in the Americas, in the Andes. So everything that I have learned from this knot is still mostly undecipherable to me. And that is the source of my art. The fact that I don't know, the fact that exactly because I don't know, I can venture in different kinds of sensitivities and sensibilities and imaginations, and invoking other people to join me in this. So I invited people to come at low tide, that was in the morning in that moment, to the Thames, to bring, because the river is drying, to bring ourselves converted into trees, metaphorically, so that the river would see us and would remember the fact that once, thousands of years ago, the Thames River, which is the reason why the city of London exists, was alive because of the ancient forest that surrounded it. So the river existed because of the forest and for the forest. So this existing because of and for is the ancient idea of service. And this is one of the ideas that we have eliminated, become extinct. The idea that we're here to serve each other and life itself. So we went down to the river, and the river felt us. And it so happened that when we were there, and this was not captured in the photos, a big boat came. So that placid river that you see there, sent a wave that made our feet wet. So in Andean terms, that river came with the purpose of the river speaking back to us and acknowledging our love, our devotion, our offering of that moment. And the last image I will show you is that afternoon, we had invited people to come into a kipu of encounters. And we have been gathering, the people at the Tate and the workers and everybody had been gathering a mountain of branches so that the people could become a living forest to go to the river. Because it was low, up high tide at the time, we couldn't go to the bottom as we had done in the morning with just a handful of people. But now this big crowd, didn't have enough time to search for pictures for you, but this walking forest made a sort of little procession pilgrimage to the river. And so I go away with these images. I'm probably close to the end of what I wanted to say. And in terms of imagining a different future, the word future already imagined itself as a future. It comes from an ancient Proto-Indo-European root, which is defined in the etymological dictionaries as beu, B as in boy, H-E-U, bearing life, for example. So futurus, as it was created as a word in Latin, it really involves the idea of being, to be and to make grow. So just the notion of being is the notion of future. The notion of growing, which pertains to every living being. Now the definition, because the definition, why did I say because there? You see, words are always tricking you into saying things that you don't ever intend to say. And so with that trick, language makes you lose the thread, disorients you, so that you are perdida, lost. And that is our true condition in this moment. And I completely forgot what I was going to say, which is just as well. And to finish with my presentation, I have no idea how long I've been with you. I wanted to say that this learning that I have involved myself in by learning from what is not word inside words, by learning what the sea wants from us, as in Concon, as in La Boca, and learning what is it that we can possibly learn from our condition of being at the edge of extinction. And so I think that this energy inside words that we cannot name is really a formative, generative energy, which language shares with all living processes. And this is something that if human society and culture manages to survive, that will be the next discovery, the next acknowledgement, to discover that languages exist among all cosmic phenomena, chemical languages, the language of smell, like Agustin showed us so beautifully, the languages between insects, the languages that are electrical and magnetic, the languages of light and shadow, and so forth. So this formative energy within language, as far as I can tell, is conformed by this extraordinary relationship between two words of the Latin language, which we use in English, because when it comes to metaphysical concepts, English, which is a language of the Northern Hemisphere, has to invoke Latin. So thanks to the invasion of the Romans of the British Isles, English, for example, can say the word attention and the word intention. And both are based in a relational process, which is tension. So attention is a particular form of tension, a particular form of relation, and so is intention. So the possibility of recovering our agency, which is at the core of the work of Yael and Aníbal and their colectivo, it is how, and you said it yourself, you said how to come off this impotency. And you probably know that male semen is losing its potency because of the chemicals in the planet. It's already reduced to 50% and is reducing so violently that humans may not be able to reproduce themselves within a short time. I don't know if this is valid science, but it has come my way. Sometimes the science that you read is also fake. But getting back to the notion of how to move away from this idea that we can only be consumers and have no agency, which is what, of course, the capitalist culture is, pressing upon every single human being in the planet right now. I think the only way is to go into that extraordinary capacity to feel fear and to feel at the same time love. And so it is in the tension between attention and intention that a communication between us and the horror that is happening can create a new language of insight and understanding that we don't yet have, but we feel it. When I hear you, I feel it. I feel that it's just the beauty of that sensing, that searching for what is an understanding and a sensibility that we have renounced because it did exist in ancient times, otherwise there would not be human culture today. So we can retrieve it because it is still alive in us. And that's where I end. Gracias, amigo.
Thank you so much, Cecilia. That was incredibly beautiful and inspiring and powerful. So thank you so much. We will now open the space for comments, questions, and like an open dialogue with our guests and also everybody who's attending. And maybe I could start by just taking what you just said, Cecilia, and also what we were reading last session, in our last session, reading session of the lab. We were also among the visionary ecologies exploration, reading some text on indigenous futurism. And I think we were also very inspired by all your connections and your practice regarding this. I don't know if you would like to maybe comment on this. Of course, it's embedded in all your work and all that you said that was already very clear and powerful, but just to open the discussion, I just wanted to ask you if you would like maybe to comment on this, or maybe you need a bit of time. Would you like, Cecilia, to maybe, or we open, actually it's open, now it's open space for all your questions. You can also write it down in the chat and we can read them. I was just starting with the indigenous futurism's question to Cecilia, but we can leave it open. And also to other guests.
Lisa has her hand raised.
Okay. Lisa, go ahead.
Thanks everybody for sharing your perspectives. I found it very, very interesting. I'm realizing that I'm having quite some problems with, or that it's difficult for me to be open towards perspectives that seem spiritual to me, because I have been very spiritual when I was younger, or I was very spiritual when I was younger, and there are reasons why I stopped, because spirituality for me always came along with, or the people that I knew who were spiritual always came along with conspiracy theories and very harsh anti-scientific attitude, which I do not want to say anybody here has at all, but those were reasons why I left it. And now I kind of would like to know maybe, or hear about your perspectives on it, and whether you would see yourself as spiritual, whether that's a good term at all. And if so, how this is maybe a perspective for change. I'm rather a Marxist thinker, so I'm also atheist, but I would be really interested in what your perspectives are on spirituality, if that is the right concept or term, and how that interacts with change, or if change needs it or it can go without spirituality, or whatever concept you would rather use. So I have all of these questions in my mind right now. I'm not sure if this is the right place for it, but I just wanted to voice it.
Okay, I can answer, Lisa, but I don't want to prevent Aníbal, Yael, or Agustina from saying.
Go ahead, Cecilia.
And yeah, well, thank God for Marxism, thank God for the communists, and I can respond that for me, I also have tried to avoid the word spiritual because it's associated, just as you said, to New Age and all this fakeness, you know. But the word spirit means breath. So if you heard Agustina, breath is a spirit, so there's no way around it. All the Marxists are just as spiritual as everybody else. And so, because nobody can exist without this breath. And think of the exquisite beauty of the word communist that has now become demonized by capitalism around the world for a very good reason, because com means with in Latin. Con in Espanol still means with. And the word compassion, the word common, commons, is what we are. We are all here with everything and everybody. So this makes us all really communists in a deep way. So if you can recover your spirituality by another name, it's just as well.
Thank you.
Okay, that's a difficult question, especially in this kind of conversation. The concrete answer, I would say, is that in the Colectivo, at least, we are in part scientists. We work with science. We have we never could deny it as a valid way of relationship with the reality, but what we try to question is about how important it is in one sense, and if it's the only way to know the world, the environment, or the only way to have a relationship with something outside ourselves. And we think that the answer is that no, it's not the only way. There's many more, and what we used to call spiritual, which is a huge debate of what it is exactly the spiritual dimension of ourselves. Anyway, this part of our beings are definitely one of the main tools that we have, probably since we have born. After that comes the rationalism, the reason, the logic, and the science. The science is a specific method. But anyways, first, there's a huge dimension that is not as well defined as the science. And all of this allows us to have knowledge from the world, and that's an important thing. We think that's very important to recover that not everything could be or should be explained by science, or it's not the only relationship that we have to do. Yeah, I'm gonna finish here.
I'm gonna respond really quickly since I know there's other questions, but I definitely consider myself spiritual and consider spirituality as sensing and being in practice and ritual with the invisible and the ephemeral. And it always comes back to that for me.
Do you want to add something, Yael, or should we go for the next question? Okay, thank you for your really beautiful answers. Johannes and then Nico.
I find myself having some problems with trying to talk about words by referring to some supposed original meaning, like that spirit originally refers to breath, and therefore spiritualism has something to do with breath, which in the way that many people use it just isn't the case. The meaning of words is most of the time much more dependent on what people intend to mean by them and how they're used and some original meaning or some derivation. There can be, of course, cases where the derivation matters, especially in historical contexts, but I don't think that responding to a question about spiritualism by referring to breath and that all people breathe is really a fitting answer.
Well, shall I speak to that? You're
Please.
very welcome. You're very welcome to have a different feeling about this, because if you believe that etymology is something firm or fixed, then I am 100% with you. But if you believe, like I do, that etymology is like a metaphorical, hypothetical conversation. Therefore, what I find in the dictionaries, I oppose to how I feel about it. And from that contrast between how I experience it and how it is in the dictionary, I have developed a whole poetic universe. So there's never an intention that, for example, if you say breath and spirit mean the same, it doesn't mean the same for most people right now, just as you said. Precisely for that reason, it is a good thing to bring it together, because it clashes, because it's an opposition, because it's a contradiction, it is a paradox. And paradox and contradiction is how the system of the cosmos works. So it's not a linear relationship, and it's a very good thing that you brought it up, because you seem to have construed that I mean it in a literal way. I don't. And so I hope this clarification helps.
Thank you, Cecilia. Nico, I think Nico has a question or comment.
Hola, hola. I'm actually here at Plaza Dignidad. I don't know if you can see La Plaza, pero I hope you can hear. It's a little bit noisy here. And I wasn't originally gonna join because I thought I had too much to do. But then like Bernadette Mayor's passed, yes, with y'all and sitting with visionary Chilean artists. Quería preguntarles, just sitting as well with el rechazo and the sort of feeling in Santiago right now that is very dense and like that it's just very hard times. And I've been thinking about that as sort of as like the new constitution, which if people don't know, Chile had this proposal of a new constitution that was very radical, and then the plebiscite lost, and very like, I don't know if unexpectedly, but overwhelmingly at least. I've been thinking about the rechazo sort of as the trickster, like Bayo Acomolafe talks about, like, and also as maybe a document, the Constitution as like a speculative fiction document of like a possible future that isn't, but also the way that that's going to get composted into like our collective consciousness. And so I just wanted to hear sort of how you all have been thinking about the rechazo and like what to do when, I feel like for me, at least as young as I am, it was the first actual political process I'd ever had any sort of faith or hope in, and now like losing all faith in government again has been a little bit difficult. Así que eso, muchas gracias, like all of you, y eso.
I don't want to take the answering system all the time, but good Agustin and Yael and Aníbal want to say something?
Yeah, but go ahead, Cecilia.
Well, Thank you, Nico, for bringing that, because that is really the spirit of Chile in this moment, the horrendous depression of having been deceived, of the willingness of the people to be deceived. That's how I see it, you know. How come that I remember writing long ago, maybe 30 years or 40 years ago, a poem about the constellation. You know that the constellation that is the most important constellation of the southern skies, which is Cruz del Sur, the Southern Cross, is the place of most light in the southern hemisphere in terms of the way we see the cosmos from the earth, and at the same time is the place of the most intense darkness in the night sky. So to me, that is Chile, you know, the light that has come from Chile on 3 historic moments as I see it, and the darkness that has come from Chile is brutal, and the darkness of the rechazo is really brutal. And it's going to take probably many generations, if there is time for a few generations, to recover from this violence against itself. Chile has involved itself in violence against its own collective intelligence, its own creativity. That's how I interpret the rechazo. And it's not about faith or not faith in the government. That is, in Spanish, un pelo de la cola. How could you translate that? A hair in the tail. No, the real thing now is to have faith in ourselves, Nico. Just as Aníbal was saying, the hair in my arms under the sweater is standing on end when I say that. How on earth are we going to have faith in our own way of sensing and feeling when we are under such brutal attack by ourselves?
Okay, so it was a difficult time for everyone who had a little bit of hope in this new constitution. I'm not in Chile. I lived it here from Italy, and I had the opportunity to talk a little bit with Elisa Loncón, which was the first president of the convention for creating the new constitution. Yeah, we talked something similar that all the topic of this conversation. So the constitution, the draft of the constitution right now acts as a sort of image in the future, like sort of, let's say north, but we could say south, to a guidance for our movements. Again, the thing here is there's a, let's say, a fight for the space of imagination. We have, as Cecilia said, the fact that the rechazo won is for me means that lack of imagination won. The necessity of certainty was more important than the necessity of imagining a better future, and that's a really sad news. But I don't know what to say about this. Maybe we have to wake up every morning again and to try to put some images again, and to try to build another one if it falls. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to speak of it because of the heartbreak that it happened this way. But one of the things that led me personally out of that grief of it not being accepted is thinking that we just have this beautiful document. We have a beautiful document that many political systems can have access to. And like you said, Aníbal, of having un sur, of having a south, of that political potential for Chile, but also for other countries, communities, and beings, to to know that we kind of pushed that bar there, and that knowledge is accessible, that document is accessible to others too, in their own imaginations of what future and communalism can be.
Thank you, Nico, for bringing the pain forth. And if in this kind of conversations, if there is no pain, there's no heart. And so you, by being in Plaza Dignidad and speaking from your soul, you have done a beautiful service to all of us.
Are there any other questions? Maria Consuelo?
Hi. About that topic, I think maybe in Chile was won the rechazo because of the scary, maybe to have a change. Maybe I think maybe the people want to have a change, but they have scary to lose how I can say the necessities that they have right now. And maybe when you think like in the future and you think you have idea like a catastrophe idea because of the how can I say incertidumbre, like you don't know what is going to happen. Maybe that is a human reaction about a change that you didn't know how it's going to end. I think maybe for that reason in the rechazo option, but I think that a little similarity when people think about the end of the world or the end of the West society, or what is happening is we the end the capitalism, the economy system. I see in so many documentaries that people maybe think what happened is the economy break, maybe the end of the world, but I think maybe it's not. Maybe we are very used to have so many commodities like clothes, comfortable cities, but when I see they work like in the colectivo, when you show the biomaterials, it was very interesting because always when I see, I don't know, for example, now we are going to use clean energy like eolic, the sun energy, or electric car. Always it was like a very beautiful car or a technology that look visually very beautiful, and you seeing maybe the future is going to be like a solution, and also you see like a pacific, like a peaceful future with the help of the technology. But I don't know if that is maybe the reality, because when you see like scientists when they say what is going to happen is we not stop or maybe try to control the climate change, or maybe the reality is was so many people we are going to lose their home, they are going to become climate refugees, and maybe that problems with that kind of technology maybe it's not enough. Like that is the solution, but maybe it's like not enough at all. And about the crisis, I think that problem is like a circle, because always humanity have problems, but I think maybe with the society that we have, maybe we try to avoid the problems, try to have only some control the situation, but try to avoid the problems. And when you have problem or difficulty, you try to don't think in that. And maybe I think maybe when humans think about the end of the world, they try to think maybe the technology is a solution, but maybe they don't like put their attention maybe how live in the societies in the past, maybe more like next to maybe with the nature, maybe respect the different stage of the nature, or try to have more harmonic relationship with that maybe use the technology try to control them. I don't know if that understand. How is that opinion?
Thanks, Consuelo, for your reflection. Could you like to ask guests to comment on that? Or I was actually thinking on what you just said about transformation, and you all were reflecting on rechazo and this staticity, of course, which is the opposite, right, of change, transformation, and this fear to transformation, which is actually staticity, is actually like, you know, totally against life. And I thought it would be nice maybe also to close, or yeah, we are coming close to the end, to ask you all how maybe you could all maybe comment or leave us some words also to bring in some hope on some, because it was very interesting how, for example, ritual was something that was present in all your practices, right? The ritual and all your presentations, which was very beautiful. And rituals are actually technologies, or I see that rituals as technologies of connection and relating, right, to the environment, to others. And maybe how we could think, and this could also help us in the lab for our future experiments and exercises, like how could you help us to think, or how do you see the rituals, what kind of rituals for the future do you think we need to change this? It's a bit very open and broad question, but I wanted to bring in the ritual and also the future, and how we bring this together to create other sort of connections, right, with the environment, with humans, with non-humans, and so on.
Well, it seems I'm always ready to answer. And I can say that the very fact that we're here pondering and wondering is an act of faith and hope. And the fact that we don't know and that we're searching for these new rituals is also an act of hope. See? And look what I said, hope is an act. It's a form of action, to believe that our actions can have an effect. And if we are coherent with everything that we have said, that we are being sensed as we sense, if we understand that reciprocity of interaction that is permanent in the cosmos, just that acknowledgement signals a way of hope. And in that context, not knowing is a plus, because we're not going to be repeating rituals that existed in the past that would be empty for us. We are in the process of creating new rituals. And these new rituals are very powerful, very beautiful, and sorrowful all at once. And that's okay.
Okay, I continue as always. Okay, I will try to connect all the things that people have said in the last three interventions. Also, I will try to connect with a comment that Johannes made in the chat. I had the feeling that Johannes was trying to questioning some ideas about the meaning and using the language of trying to put an intention, right, in a fact that not necessarily has it. But I think it's precisely about that what we're talking about. I could say, without trying to attack you, Johannes, is just to make a comment, an idea of what we're talking about. In that comment or in that intention, I can feel a resistance, and that's the resistance of the reason. There's nothing bad about it, but there is a fact that our reason resists to some things, and that is a structure, because we were created in sort of a structure, and at least for me, living here in Europe was a very important cultural shock in understanding how different and how profound those structures act in the conception of life, of history, of time, and in our daily life. And while for Italians, for example, here, the future is something quite similar to the present, in the sense that they expect that when, I don't know, in 50 years more, they will have a very similar life to what they have right now. I would say that as a South American, as a Chilean, I have a very apocalyptic notion of the time, and I would say that I don't know if I will arrive at, I don't know, 80 years, because I don't know if the world will still exist. So in these different structures that we have, I would say that the important thing is, in first place, to trying to question it, question them, and to trying to suspend them for a little moment. And when you suspend them, the world appears as a chaos, of course. And there's so many different tools that humans have, that we have as humans, to create some order in this world. And what we try to explain, to say, is that probably one of the most basic is rituals. And rituals is a very broad field that for me starts with my breakfast. I need to have a very long breakfast with some sort of things, and I have that time, and it's a special time, and it's important for me to start my day. Not in a productive sense, but in a personal sense. And as this breakfast, there could be many rituals we tend to create those rituals, like to go into the cinema once a week, I don't know, or some rituals that we used to have with our parents, I don't know. Rituals are very important to understand the cosmos. So what if we just stop to think about rituals as some that traditional people are in, I don't know, Africa and South America, and try to understand that it's a dimension of our daily life, and that in the if we are conscious of that, we can use it. We can use it to create new things.
Yeah, thank you both for your beautiful comments. And yeah, I see rituals as the structure of our care and our mourning work, our grief work with each other, but also with other species and the earth and other beings. So seeing them as a structure and a way to maintain that practice. And like Cecilia said, there is a hopefulness in that, and that we're invested in creating structure for our care work, even with ourselves and beyond.
Thank you. Toto, did you want to say something?
Yeah, Christiana has a question.
You're on mute. You're on mute.
I'm here. Yes,
Yeah,
I want to connect this art framework with the problem of the rejection, the rechazo in Chile. And I think there is too important because we talk maybe the idea of the rejection in the idea of individualism. We think in this framework, but I think there is a specific institution that maybe the artwork aren't touching in the quotidian life, and there is particularly a specific institution that influence the people who vote the rejection. For example, the evangelical churches. And I put this case because there is a framework with, that connect spiritual thinking. Yes, the necessity of communities of have a spiritual life, and the evangelical churches resolve that, and they influence the people to vote the rejection in Chile. And another institution could be, for example, the work environmental. And my question is how the artwork, the art academical, can touch this work, because there is another word, the idea of the another Chile, the deep Chile, that a Chile that doesn't know about the art exhibition and the art biennales, for example, much less the international biennale, for example. People who doesn't speak English, doesn't know about the epistemology and the historical work that we are thinking about. And yes, this environmental could be maybe elitist from these people, and they are the people who vote the rejection. And I think there is easy to forget that and thinking in these people act as the massa, you know. I think my question is how we can generate new institutions that touch and put together this work. Maybe and end to finish my question, I have a reflection and maybe a nostalgic from an epoch that I didn't live because I wasn't born, but I have this nostalgic about the mutualism, internationalism movements from the 20th century, that they connect some work that maybe now I think it didn't happen. Yes, I hope you can understand my English. And it's an open question.
Shall we reverse the order and have the other speakers speak and then I speak?
Yeah, I can get started. I mean, yeah, I think so much of the work is figuring out what those configurations look like. And for me, maybe getting rid of the idea of institutions and maybe making fungal networks is more exciting for new orders and structures.
Okay, I should say, Christian, that I cannot respond to your question.
Sorry.
I don't know, and that is I think that's the question.
That's the question.
That's the question. That's the main question. Because yeah, okay, maybe in this seminar right now, we all more or less agree of some things, and we can we can have hope about the future with this seminar, with this session ends. But yes, the world is way more difficult outside this session of seminar. So I don't know, but that's a little bit about what we were talking about when we name the problem as a problem of impotence. I don't have an answer. We don't have an answer. We just try to do things. We try to do it in the best way that we can, through trying to have a very I would say, devotional process to the work of art that we did. We really worked a lot trying to understand the different problems that we have in front of us, but it's not an answer, and we don't have an answer. Maybe it's better that we don't have an answer, precisely because has something to do with what you did. You have a really nostalgic way of thinking of something, a recipe that already exists in the past. You didn't live it.
Yes.
Neither I do. But yeah, we used to take the tools that are already there. Maybe it's a good idea, and maybe not. Maybe we have to redefine everything because the world is absolutely different right now. But yeah, that's. I think that the better thing is just at least to try something. To try something is better than this paralysis that we live, or that at least I feel that we live in a really static situation, and when you have from one side, on one hand, the global crisis and the world collapsing, and on the other hand, you have this paralyzation, and sort of angustia comes in your body. So what I think that what we did as a collective was to try to release this anguish, this angustia from our body a little bit, to start a conversation. I think that's the main goal, to start a conversation.
Okay, so I guess I thought this was going to end at 12, and it's already 12:01. So I will try to be very brief. And it seems that my voice is here, the voice of a different era. And the question is very valid, Christian. It's the most important question, which is how can we bridge? Because the truth of the matter is that more or less since the 70s forward, the isolation and encapsulation of the intellectual sphere away from the general public is a purpose of the right wing. It's an express purpose, and they have fully succeeded. I grew up in a world, I was born in the late 40s and I grew up in the 50s. And back then, it was a universal idea of every political party, I would say, that public education was the most important thing, and there was public broadcasting. It was owned by the state. Therefore, for example, I was creating TV programs that would reach everybody from Tierra del Fuego to Atacama when I was 21 years old in that old Chile, you see? And so we were cut off from that understanding that public education was for all to be part of, with the military coup and that wave of coups that began in the late 50s in Guatemala and then went all through Latin America. So what are the channels that are left for us? It's learning again from biology, it's infection and contagion, So what are the systems that are still in place? Some form of public education, some form of broadcasting. So you see that art movements around the entire planet, in Asia, in Europe, in Africa, everywhere that you look, these colectivos are working in communities, in locales, to get past this ownership of the circulation of information by the corporations and the powers that be. So that is what we're doing. That is what we're inventing, a new form in which the visionary imagination can infect everybody. That is what we're trying to do, to inflict a new kind of contagion, which is love for life, which is love for the complexity, love for the uncertainty. And so I think we are all doing it, but we knowing that we are up against this wall run by, as you mentioned, evangelicals, governments, political parties, run by everyone. So we are the loose cannons, the artists. We are perhaps one of the few spaces where there can be freedom of imagination. Therefore, that makes us responsible for what kind of art we do, where we do it, and with whom we do it, above all. So I would say thank you, Christian, for bringing that terrible, painful, fantastic question. And it all comes to me into education. I personally have been inventing educational systems and somehow making sure that the Ministry of Education admits that little sliver for someone like me and like people like me can intervene and be present in the life, regular life of regular people.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christian. Thank you, Cecilia. I think that was a perfect and beautiful ending with the visionary infection and virus we really need to spread all over the world. And yeah, in respect of your time, especially our guests, so we just very shortly, yeah, close. Thank you so much, Cecilia. Thank you so much, Aníbal, Yael, and Agustin for being with us. It was really, really inspiring, and I'm sure it's gonna be also very inspiring for our lab, for what's coming up. We have another open session in January. We will also let you all know in case you wanna attend. And yeah, it's been a pleasure, a great honor. So thank you so much again. And the students, the group of the lab, we will stay a little bit longer. Yeah, if the others want to say anything else. I don't know, Jens, Kara, if you want to also say something else, or we just close. And yeah, we are sorry, Natalia, but we are just running out of time.
I have to go, so I say goodbye and thank you, Elisa. Thank you, everybody. It was a really moving pleasure to be with all of you. Ciao, amigos.
Thank you so much, Cecilia. Take care.
Ciao, ciao.